We all know that Samsung releases 3 devices every year, but you wouldn't really know it based on its ad campaigns, since they push the top-of-the-line Ultra series. The fact of the matter, though, is that not everybody actually needs everything the S Ultra series has to offer, which is why Samsung does understand this and has made 2 other devices in the S line. If the Ultra series isn't for you, but you're looking for something that will catch you up to as close as possible to that device, then the S23 Plus may be the right device for you. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the reasons why you might want to consider this phone and just my general experience with it over the course of using it for a while now. If you've seen or held the S22 Plus, then there will be no surprises with the design here. The S23 Plus is surrounded by an armor aluminum frame and is sandwiched between 2 sheets of Gorilla Glass Victus 2. The only thing that has changed this year is the cameras here on the back, which are now individual pieces instead of being a part of the camera island we've seen since the S20 series. If you've held the S22 Ultra or the S23 Ultra in your hand and thought it might be a nuisance to work one-handed with those devices, then the S23 Plus might also potentially be a little bit better in this regard due to not being as tall or as wide as those devices. This makes it a little easier to reach the top of the phone with your thumb to do things like pull down the notification bar or use the hardware toggles you see here. The one thing I really haven't been a fan of and still am not a fan of, even with the S22 Plus, is the sharp corners this device has on it. I just feel that they dig into your palms too much, but this is really more for people who don't like to put a case on their phone. I also wish that Samsung would switch back to the glossy glass instead of the matte filled one that we are getting with devices as of late. And yes, this would introduce more fingerprints. However, I do personally find that it looks more aesthetically pleasing in a lot of cases. Though, I guess if they did that, then I'd have the same issue I have with my Flip 4, which likes to slide off of the wireless charger because it is made of glossy glass. The display is definitely one of the most important parts of any device, and usually if you don't pay up, then you won't get the best. But you should definitely know that you are getting a quality display here. I've personally been pleased with the overall colors and quality on the S23 Plus. And no, this is not a 4K resolution display, but that actually really doesn't matter here and really won't matter on any smartphone for that matter. The FHD Plus resolution is more than good enough for daily tasks and won't leave you feeling like you're using a phone from the past. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm a display expert or guru in any way, but whatever I am looking at on this display, whether it be videos, pictures, or scrolling through apps still, just makes me feel like I have a premium device in my hands. If you're wondering if this display is usable in sunlight, it surely is. And don't worry about those scan lines you see, that's just the screen refreshing over and over again, but you can definitely clearly see this in the brightest of sunlights. I feel like we've reached a baseline for performance on most devices, and what truly matters is how they perform beyond their normal duties. It's also really good that Samsung and Qualcomm have partnered together to make a specific variant of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy devices. This processor definitely performs well, and I feel like it was something that was needed for the people who actually wanted it. If you're doing regular everyday tasks, you most likely won't notice any of the performance gains here, but, and this is coming from someone who doesn't play games on their device, I'd say that if you're doing anything that is graphically intensive, that's where this processor will definitely shine. It's probably not wise to just go off of the benchmarking numbers here, as those can be fudged, but taking a look at the previous generation processor, you can see that the S23 Plus maintains a more consistent and smoother FPS range. Now, like I said, I don't play games on my phone, but if you've had any problems that you've noticed on the previous generation Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 Plus, those issues will most likely either not appear as significant here or not exist at all. Of course, that also depends on how well the game is optimized for this processor. But I'd imagine that developers will probably take advantage of what the specifics of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy have to offer. In terms of the software, there's nothing new to report here. There's nothing that you really will be able to do on this device that you can't do on one of Samsung's older devices. And if that is the case, it's probably just going to be a software update. So if you have an S22 or an S21 Plus, then just wait it out. I feel like I've said this a million times, but one of the things that I used to look forward to on Samsung devices is what's new in the camera department. If you share the same enthusiasm about the camera specs of a mobile device, then you'll be pretty disappointed here since Samsung didn't change anything about the cameras on the S23 Plus, except for their look. The biggest upgrade was reserved strictly for the S23 Ultra, and I can see why, but I feel like they could have at least given us a wider aperture for better night photos, and maybe up to 5 times zoom or something like that. In saying that though, this device does not take bad pictures or video for that matter, and I feel as if we've come to a plateau point when it comes to photography, at least when it comes to Samsung's devices. They've kind of thrown everything they've had development-wise into their cameras, and that means you can really get great photos even without buying something like the Ultra series. Another area that seems to have no change is in the 5G speeds. Not that that really needs to change anyway, since we're literally able to get home internet speeds on the go. But in this regard, the S23 Plus is about as fast as the S22 Plus and other Samsung devices that utilize mmWave technology. And that brings the fastest 5G speeds out there pretty much. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth have also seen an upgrade here. You now have access to Wi-Fi 6E provided you have a router that is capable of outputting a Wi-Fi 6E signal. To elaborate more on Wi-Fi though, I do actually have a Wi-Fi 6E capable router, and there is this issue that I get with the S23 Plus, where the device will be connected to my router, but it will state that there's no internet connection. This also happens with my Tab S8 Ultra, so it seems more like a software issue than a hardware one, but I could also be wrong about that too. Sometimes I can even be connected to the router and still not get any data throughput, as you can see here with YouTube. Other than that, I've even tried something like the web browser and another device I have on hand, and those devices typically work well, but for some reason there's just these Wi-Fi issues I keep having. Could be me, could be the Wi-Fi 6 router I have, but eventually everything does end up loading, but it's just kind of annoying. Bluetooth has seen an upgrade to version 5.3. But this upgrade is more of a passive one that has to do with fortifying the stability of the connection, so don't expect to see anything here that you can benefit from. And even if you could, you'd still most likely need a Bluetooth 5.3 capable device. The audio quality of the speakers seems to have improved on the S23 Plus, but I feel like the mids have a more pronounced feeling to them. I'm not saying that these are the best speakers out there, but you could also hear them for yourself. So if you've seen my S23 Ultra review, you'd know that the biggest and best feature I think there is the battery life improvements made to that device. And the same is true here with the S23 Plus. I did 3 specific tests where I was able to use the device the way I normally would and was able to get past 8 hours of screen on time and have my device last till the next day without charging it up in any way. I said this before, but I will say it again. This is the one thing that I think makes getting this device truly worth it, and the efficiency claims we usually get are no longer wishful thinking and will make it so that people don't have to worry about running to a charger more frequently than they normally would. Now, this kind of battery life is going to be solely dependent on how you use your phone, but if you are sort of a average to moderate to heavy user, then you should definitely expect to get better battery life than you've ever gotten on any other Samsung device previously, and that's a great thing to look forward to. Now, something else I've also stated before is the fact that Samsung needs to do something about its charging speeds. Though the S23 Plus can take advantage of the 45-watt charger, it's a bit annoying to see that devices in other brands have both faster wired charging speeds and wireless charging speeds. In the test I did for another video, charging with a 25-watt charger for 15 minutes gave me back 29%, while charging with a 45-watt charger in the same time frame gave me 25% back. This is kind of where the problem lies, as charging speeds seem pretty inconsistent when using the 45-watt charger, and I understand that Samsung has to throttle that charger so it doesn't damage your battery, but I just wish they would find a way to up the overall charging speeds and make it consistent across the board. If you are curious about wireless charging, then during the test I did, I got back 11% within 15 minutes on a 15-watt wireless charger, which is the max this device can charge at. These charging speeds are the ones we've had for years, and I think it just would have made a worthwhile upgrade to have them all upgraded across the board. Maybe even throw in a bigger battery too. To summarize all of this up, the S23 Plus is a phone that will seem very familiar to owners of last year's model, the S22 Plus. From a design standpoint, nothing has really changed here with the exception of the back cameras, and it still has those sharp edges around its bezel like I talked about before. I do wish Samsung would go back to the gloss finish instead of the matte that we've had for the last few devices, but this isn't such a big deal, and it really is more of an aesthetic thing than a functional one. I used to think that devices that were in the upper high end needed to have a 4K display, but the S23 Plus has proven me wrong with how good its display is despite its FHD Plus resolution. I enjoy watching content on this screen and the colors that it outputs overall. The performance of the next few Galaxy devices is going to be promising in the graphics sector, since Samsung's partnership with Qualcomm has deepened after years of having Qualcomm processors be hit or miss in key areas. This processor performs in daily tasks and should also excel in graphical tasks for those who are keen on finding out how far they can push their phones. Samsung hasn't changed any of the specifications when it comes to the cameras, so expect that the S23 Plus is going to take photos in a similar fashion to the S22 Plus, albeit there might be some slight differences due to some software tweaks they've made on the back end. I still do wish that Samsung would pay more attention to the S Plus devices and the regular S devices in the camera department. Maybe give us something like 5x zoom in addition to the 3x optical zoom we have already, but overall I just wish there were some upgrades here instead of the company just selfishly reserving those camera upgrades for the Ultra devices. 5G connectivity is as good as 5G connectivity is at this point, with no major changes, and this is something I can be a little bit more lenient and forgiving with, since the speeds are pretty ridiculous in a good way anyway. It is good to see that Samsung has upgraded Wi-Fi in this device for those who have newer routers, but then again, those speeds might potentially be overkill anyway, especially if the Wi-Fi issues I mentioned before continue to plague this device. I'm glad to see Bluetooth pushing forward also, and I personally can't think of anything I would want But if it makes the connection even more stable than it has been before, then overall I think everybody's going to be for it anyway. If using the speakers is your thing on whatever device you own, then the S23 Plus should make you happy with the quality of its upgraded speakers. And that's really all I can say about that. The battery life is the main reason I would say to look into this device. And it's pretty much been phenomenal for me, and that is the reason to give this phone some praise. But I don't know if it'll be worth it for everybody unless you are a person who actually needs that battery life. Charging speeds are definitely in need of an upgrade, and I would definitely say that the 45-watt charger that Samsung continues to push with devices like this and the Ultra devices needs to be a lot more consistent. I understand that there were some issues in the past, however, research and development is made for things like that. If anything, I do wish that Samsung would at least upgrade the wireless charging speeds, as wireless charging is something I personally use out of sheer convenience. To finish this video off, I'll say what I originally said about the S23 Ultra. It's something I don't see as a worthwhile upgrade for people who have last year's model, and I do feel the same way about the S23 Plus. Since honestly, I'm of the belief that we will basically get what we take from these manufacturers at that point. Sure, it's great to upgrade the processor and upgrade the battery life and things of that sort, but if you're only getting two things every single year, as opposed to everything being upgraded across the board, is it really worth it in that case? Especially when these companies are asking for way more money than they used to with their older devices. But again, this is just my personal opinion and not one you have to agree with. I just feel that there is more to Samsung, and there always has been more to Samsung than they are putting out as it stands right now. All right, so that is all I have for all of you on the S23 Plus. And like I said, this is not a bad phone. I just think that Samsung could be doing a lot more in terms of upgrading their phones across the board. But then again, maybe the argument should be that we need to go back to 2-year upgrades instead of the 1-year upgrades that we now currently have. My personal opinion, once again, I don't think we need a phone every single year. But anyway, wherever you are in the world, have a great day, a great afternoon, a great evening, or a great night, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching as always.